Welcome to Higher Learning with Pastor Derek J. Little.
For the last couple of weeks, we've been teaching and we've been going over some things. And today is going to be concluded with the message entitled, Will You Be Made Whole? You know, over the course of this series, we've talked about many different issues. We've talked about embracing the presence, possibility, and process of your greatness. We've taken time to examine how we're actually building our lives. You know, just questioning whether or not we're doing what we were born to do, or whether we're doing something other than what gives our lives fulfillment. We have examined the seedy place of our lives. You know, that's the place that most of the issues in our lives live. Things happen. They come into our lives at some point, some time. And whether or not we deal with those seedy things, those seedy places, those places where habits and tendencies, experiences were sown into our lives. You know, we talked about how we needed to get to the bottom of those issues and begin to root them out, pull them out, throw them down, destroy them, and then begin to build and plant in the place of those things what will give our lives meaning and make our lives more blessed. We took time to really look into ourselves, to examine the root of many of those issues, and to deal with them. And that's what I hope that we can continue to do in this series. We've also taken time to even recognize the obstacles we feel are hindering the progress we want to make in our lives. We've taken time to talk about coming out of hiding, no longer allowing fear to keep us from scrutinizing the habits and tendencies we have yielded to in our lives. We've also taken time to talk about, on a more deep level, the mentality of not just trying, but understanding that trying is not enough for the life of significance that we want. We've made a commitment to becoming doers, because in doing, we take personal responsibility for the change that we want. And we also talked about the catalyst for change, which is taking action, as we've come to understand that understanding is able to change minds. But it's when we take action that our lives are changed for the better. And then finally, we talked about understanding and embracing the why for our living. You know, many people live their lives day to day. They go to work, they come back, they do whatever they do, and they never really take the time to figure out, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? What gives my life happiness and fulfillment? What makes me excited? The why in your life is so important. And I heard a statement once before that said, if you know the why for your living, you can endure almost anyhow. And I think that's powerful, because what that really says is, if you know why you're doing what you're doing, it doesn't matter how hard it is. It doesn't matter what the challenge. You will do what you have to do because you know why you're doing it. And now, as we begin today's teaching, I want to ask you a question. Are you interruptible? I mean, really think about that for a minute. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight for us two stories out of the Bible as we begin to move into that question. Let's go to Genesis chapter 22, verse 9 through 13. It states, Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. And he said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for an offering instead of his son. Also, I want you to go over right now to Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 4. And it states, Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. You know, what I want us to think about is how often in our lives are we busy? Are we running? Are we doing this or that? And how often do you take time to really examine the things that we're doing? Because you can be busy about a lot of things and still not get anything done. But in these two stories, what I wanted to highlight for you, I want to show you an example of how being interruptible in your life can make or break you. It can determine whether you kill something that should have lived or whether you allow something to live that should have died. And also these two stories really talk about the provision of God being made if we're patient and we know what we're being led into. When it came to Abraham, I think it was very interesting because just like many of our lives, when you think about it, how many things have we killed because we didn't hear God or because we were not patient or just we weren't interruptible. And God, and I believe in this season, God wants to interrupt our lives, not just to make things bad, but to lead us according to the knowledge of the truth, to lead us according to his will and his way. But friend, you and I are going to have to be interruptible in order to do that, in order for God to lead us. We cannot continue to resist his hand or to resist his voice more so. When he's speaking, when he's giving us discernment by the Holy Spirit, you got to be open. And I think Abraham's story was so powerful because right in the midst of him doing something that he probably was fully engaged in, something he was emotional about, he still had an ear to hear. And that's what we have to do. We have to have an ear to hear and be interruptible. When it came to Moses at the burning bush, I think the key with his story was that when he said in verse 3, I will now turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. Then in verse 4, it said this, so when the Lord saw that, he turned aside to look. See, now right there, sometimes God will allow things to happen in our lives. He'll allow situations and circumstances to look like they are out of control. And to the naked eye, it's just some life. Stuff happens. But I believe sometimes God will allow things to happen. And right in the midst of the stuff that's happening, he really wants to see if our perspectives would change, if we could look at it a little different. And the key in that passage is when God saw that Moses turned aside to see something different. although it was probably common for Moses to see stuff burning in the desert, I'm pretty sure there were probably bushes that burned from the intense heat of the desert at times. And so for Moses to see something burning probably wasn't even strange at all. But the point is, he saw something that would have been seen as common to someone else as something that needed to be looked at a little closer. And so even in your life, as you're going through, as things are happening, slow down, look at where you are. And if you are open enough, perhaps you'll see things differently, and God will then open your eyes that he might begin to speak to you and lead you in ways that you should go. That's one of the things we've been talking about throughout this series, is really getting ourselves to a place where we're examining ourselves, because there's really no examination that's more powerful than self-examination. See, other people can say what they want, but when you begin to look into your life and you begin to see things that are not right and you're honest with yourself, that kind of examination is the best that you can ever experience, because we know ourselves better than almost anyone. So as we continue to move forward in this final teaching, will you be made whole? The foundational thing I wanted to lay out there, well, one of them anyway, was being interruptible. So now we're going to move to the second point of this teaching, which is entitled The Power of You. And I get excited when I come to this point, because there is so much that we've discovered and we've covered over the course of this series that deals with us dealing with us preparing ourselves to experience our own greatness, us getting out of our own way. And so there's such a power that resides on the inside of us. But we have to be careful how we talk, how we think, how we position ourselves. And so I want us to go to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 20 through 21. And it states, "A man's stomach shall be satisfied from the fruits of his mouth. From the produce of his lips he shall be filled. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." What I want you to do is to consider how you're speaking over your life. Consider how you're viewing yourself and what you're putting in the atmosphere surrounding your life, even other people's lives. Be careful what you say, because what you say can condition you. There was a philosopher I learned about when I was in college, and his name was Descartes. And he said, "I think, therefore I am." That's powerful. When I heard that in class, I thought to myself, wow, he was basically saying whatever he thinks, he has the potential to become. So think about that. As you think about the power of you, the power that you possess, let everything you do be done to empower yourself, to enrich yourself, to make your life better. And let it start with having positive thinking and being very positive in the things that you say about yourself, because sometimes we are so negative. I know I can be very negative about myself, and that's not good. I'm changing that. Because we create this cloud around ourselves that's either sunshine and rainbows or either rain and lightning. And you don't want to do that. You want to create a great environment around yourself, because at the end of the day, no one is really going to speak more into you than you speak into yourself. There have been many times in my life where I have encouraged myself, and I go through periods where I'm down and I'm really challenging myself. And I just start encouraging myself. I start looking at the situation and I start speaking over myself and saying, "Derek, man, you're a great man. Yes, you got things you need to work on, man, but you have made some strides, man. You've been doing things that you need to be done in certain areas. Yes, you need to get some other things done here, but man, hey, you're better off than you think. You're better off than you think. Man, I'm at my job, and my job provides for my family. It gives me a sense of security. Thank God for this job." So that's what you have to do sometimes. Encourage yourself and realize that there's power of life and death in your tongue. So choose life. And I want you to consider this amidst all the things that you might say or might think about yourself. If you died today, what dreams, what talents, what ideas, what stories would die with you? The reason I pose those questions is because there will be moments in life when we will need to search ourselves. We all will have moments of truth when we will need to answer some tough questions. Where is my life headed? Am I doing all that I can do to maximize my potential and abilities? Am I growing mentally and spiritually? No matter how you answer any of these questions, the hard truth is this: whatever the outcome, you are ultimately responsible. Wherever you go, or whatever you decide to do with your life, there is always going to be a constant: you. If there is one thing in life from which none of us can escape, it is ultimately ourselves. There is a tremendous power that each of us wields over our own lives. And with this power, we could either hinder or emancipate our own potential for growth, success, and happiness. Here's where only you can decide the outcome. Life will always be, for the most part, what you make of it. I want you to think about that, friend. I want you to think about the power that resides on the inside of you. And I want you to think about everything that is weighing in the balance, waiting for you to emerge, to come forth, and waiting for you to walk it out. You have power on the inside of you. I encourage you to continue to stir up those gifts and begin to identify with what you're carrying on the inside of you. The next point we're going to go into is called change your belief. And as we move into this third point, I want you to go to Romans chapter 12, and we're going to read in verse 2. It says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." There's nothing more powerful, I think, than a belief. Belief systems, methodologies, mentalities, those are powerful things because they go with us throughout life. We carry them with us as we get older, as we have children, as we get married, and those things can really affect the course of our lives, the course of our marriage, how we parent, how we handle ourselves. And so what I want to bring to your mind here is the truth that all personal breakthroughs begin with a change in beliefs. So how do we change? The most effective way is to get your brain to associate massive pain to the old belief. You and I must feel deep in our guts that not only has this belief cost us pain in the past, but it's costing us in the present and ultimately can only bring us pain in the future. So what we have to do is internalize that. And so as we internalize it, I want you to think about it like this. Feel deep in your gut that not only has this belief cost you pain in the past, but it's costing you in the present and ultimately can only bring you pain in the future. And then guess what? You must associate tremendous pleasure to the idea of adopting a new empowering belief. That's powerful stuff. And I want you to really think about that in your life. Think about things. That's why on our website at NoWalls christianministry.org, we have a meditation board. And I created that because that was something that I drew from. The idea of getting motivational quotes and getting different things that I felt that built me up in my mind and exposed me to the truths and to mentalities and points of views that I never was exposed to in my life. And so that's what I encourage for you, friend. Start finding motivational information, inspiring words of encouragement, things that you meditate on that help to change your belief. Because if you don't, you'll conform to this world and you won't have a renewed mind. This world, in many ways, is negative. And so you don't want to have a negative mentality about your life. So begin to help yourself by developing a more positive belief system and really examining the belief systems that you have. All right, now we're moving into our final point as we close out this series. And it's stated, will you be made whole? Now, I want to share a story with you as I close this series. I want you to go to John chapter 5, verse 2 through 8. Now it states, now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethsaida, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Then Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." I think that's a very powerful story. And you know what I find to be most interesting is the fact that Jesus saw that this man had been in that condition for 38 years. That's almost a full generation. So immediately in my mind, what I thought to myself as I read that was what jumped off the page to me was that he had perhaps been dealing with something that's generational. Now, how many of you ever heard of a generational curse? Things that you see right now, negative traits that you see in your bloodline with your mother and father, with your uncles and different people that you see, they all deal with some of the same stuff. Those are generational issues. And they're not generational issues because they're supposed to be there for generations. These are generational issues because no one dares to change the condition. And so in this man's case, Jesus saw that he was in this condition for 38 years. He was, and the Bible says that he was moved with compassion because he saw that he had been in this condition for a long time. So I don't know what the man's issue was, but when Jesus looked at this man and he said, now this is the same Jesus that was healing people, creating clay, and healing eyes. And this was the same one that was the hem of his garment was healing people. And Jesus didn't have to ask this man a question. All he had to do was just look at him, or he could have just touched him. Jesus was so powerful. He was feeding thousands with the loaves and fish. Now, this is the powerful thing. So when Jesus saw this man and he said to him, "Will you be made well?" That was deep, because when he looked into his life, he saw the condition. He saw the generational curse. I'm kind of taking a little liberty here. perhaps he saw the man's generational issues. Perhaps he saw a whole lot of stuff in this man's life and asked him, do you want to be made well? Now, I truly believe that when he said that, he asked a question and he made a statement. He said, I believe, will you be made whole? I believe Jesus dealt with the man's psychological and emotional issues. Because I remember breaking my ankle when I was playing football. And just like any other athlete, sometimes when you get hurt and it creates a mental issue that you carry with you. So even after your injury heals up, there's still a psychological hold that injury has on your mind. So you kind of have to work through that psychological part first before you can really, extend yourself the way you want. So I can imagine only in situations like this, when you have people that's been sick or people that's dealing with emotional, mental issues, whatever you want to call it. There's a mental aspect that has to get healed first as they're healing their bodies or as their lives are being changed. The mentality has to be dealt with. So I believe when Jesus said to this man, will you be made whole? But that he was saying first, will be made whole. He was putting this man's mental and emotional state of being into order. And then he dealt with his physical. He said, take up your bed and walk. I think our lives are like that. Ask yourself, all the stuff we've been covering in this series as we're closing it now, all the things that have come to the surface, everything that's come to light, all the things that you know you need to work on. Ask yourself, will you be made well? See, you can take a crackhead, you can clean him up, get him out of the situation he's in. But if his mentality does not change, he will go right back to the place of darkness, the place of sickness. And so the same thing with us. You can talk about all these things, but if you don't make a decision to change your conditioning, mentally, emotionally, you will find yourself not making any ground in your life. And so as we close this series, I want to lay that in your mind and put that out there. And I'm going to leave you with this statement. Growth isn't for everybody. Some people just want to stay the same forever. And friend, I pray that is not you. I pray you are someone that wants to grow, wants to change, and that you will do everything in your power to walk in the light and be blessed in every way that you can. Again, I want to thank you for listening. My name is Derek Little, and it's an honor to have had an opportunity to share with you these truths, and I pray that your life is enriched.